Hey guys, let's go ahead and go over our Chapter 8 study guide. Identify the composition of our atmosphere. Include the percentages of each gas. Nitrogen, 78%, oxygen, 21%, trace gases, 1%. Now remember that this 78% nitrogen is unusable until it undergoes nitrogen fixation. Name the 6 abiotic factors and describe each factor's role in the ecosystem. The sun is the source of almost all energy on Earth, almost all, provides warmth and light, affects climate and temperature. Climate describes average weather conditions, influences what types of organisms can live in the area. Temperature. Temperatures on Earth vary greatly. Hot or cold an area is the temperature. Influences what type of organism can live in the area. Water. All life on Earth requires water for important life processes. Every ecosystem requires water. Atmosphere, the layer of gas that surrounds Earth, provides oxygen and protection from the harmful rays of the sun. Soil provides water and nutrients to the plants. It is home to many organisms, such as insects, bacteria, and fungi. So we're going to remember here that abiotic is not living. Let's go ahead and change that to highlighter, Not living. Not living, never was alive. Biotic, on the other hand, was living, or came from something that was living, or was once living. That's biotic. Weather conditions include temperature, moisture, and wind. This is what describes climate. Matter cycles through the ecosystem in the water cycle, nitrogen cycle, oxygen cycle, and carbon cycle. So we know that that goes from the atmosphere to the earth, back up to the atmosphere cycles. Draw the water cycle. Include definitions and arrows showing how water cycles through the atmosphere. So the three terms are precipitation, condensation, evaporation. So evaporation, liquid water changes to water vapor and rises into the atmosphere. Temperature, humidity, and wind affect how quickly water evaporates. So evaporation is going to happen over any body of water, whether that be an ocean, a lake, a stream, a puddle, your water glass. Okay, then condensation. Water vapor cools and changes to a liquid water. So this is going to be where our clouds are. Precipitation falls to earth as rain, sleet, snow, or hail, and that depends on the temperature of the temperature of the air. Okay. What is transpiration? Transpiration is the release of water vapor through the leaves and stems of plants. Describe the role of animals in the nitrogen cycle. Animals take in nitrogen when eating plants and other organisms. Nitrogen returns to the environment in the waste products of organisms. Some type of bacteria can break down the tissues of dead organisms, returning the nitrogen in the tissues back to the environment. Describe producers, for example, phytoplankton's role in the oxygen cycle. Producers release oxygen as a byproduct of photosynthesis. It is estimated that phytoplankton release more than 50% of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. That phytoplankton is a plant, an algae type plant in the ocean. What process is responsible for returning carbon to the soil and releasing CO2 back to the atmosphere? Decomposition is the breaking down of dead plants and animals. This process returns compounds to the soil and releases carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Carbon is stored in fossil fuels such as coal, oil, and natural gas. Compare and contrast photosynthesis and chemosynthesis, how they are similar. Well, they're both using water and carbon dioxide to make food for the plants. They are both responsible to produce food for plants. Photosynthesis, however, is going to use light energy to make food for plants. So with photosynthesis, we have light energy, water, and carbon dioxide to make food for the plants. And then in chemosynthesis, we use chemical energy to make food for the plants. So chemical energy, water, and carbon dioxide. Describe how nitrogen is necessary for life on Earth. Nitrogen is an essential part of proteins, which all organisms need to stay alive. Nitrogen is also an important part of DNA, the molecule that contains genetic information. So we've got DNA and we've got proteins. Producer and consumer. Producer makes their own food. So they undergo photosynthesis to make their own food. So that is grass, trees, algae. We are not producers. We cannot make our own food. So consumers cannot make own food, must consume other organisms to get energy. So we've got herbivores. They are eat-only producers. And producers, remember, are plants. So that's going to be a deer, a rabbit, a mouse. An omnivore is going to eat both plants and meat. Humans, brown bear, chimps. Carnivores are going to eat only meat, like lions, wolves, snakes. Detritivore, they're going to feed on dead organisms. So that's worms and insects. Decomposers, they also feed on the dead organisms and return the nutrients to the soil and atmosphere. So that's going to be our bacteria and mushrooms. Use the terms listed below, create and label a food chain. Include arrows showing the flow of energy. So what you had to choose from was sun, mouse, consumers, you need to use that 3 times. Carnivores, you need to use that 2 times. Producer, owl, grass, snake, emits energy, and herbivore. Okay, so we start, the beginning of every food chain is going to start with an energy source. So we are looking at the sun is going to emit energy to the grass, which is a producer. So right here, we've got photosynthesis going on. So the grass is a producer, making its own food for its own life processes, for its own growth, and storing the rest. So then here comes this mouse, which is a consumer, but an herbivore, and it feeds directly on the grass. So the energy from the grass transfers to the mouse. So these arrows here indicate flow of energy from one organism to the next. So the energy stored in the grass flows to the mouse when the mouse eats it. So then the snake comes along, and the snake is also a consumer. It's a carnivore, so it eats only meat. So when it eats the mouse, the energy stored in the mouse transfers to the snake. So then the owl is a consumer, also a carnivore, and when it eats the snake, the energy from the snake transfers to the owl. So the arrows in a food chain indicate transfer of energy. Matter and energy flow through an ecosystem. Sort the following terms based on how it flows through an ecosystem. So, ones that flow in was one direction, that's energy. So we know that the law of conservation of energy states that energy cannot be created or destroyed. The ones that cycle through the atmosphere or through the ecosystem are water, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen. So energy doesn't doesn't cycle because it never returns back up to the sun. Describe how a food web is different than a food chain. A food chain shows how energy flows in an ecosystem through one feeding relationship. A food web shows how these food chains in an ecosystem are interconnected and show many feeding relationships. So a food chain is one feeding relationship, a food web is multiple feeding relationships, and food chains that are interconnected and overlapping. Is a food web or a food chain a more accurate description of the energy flow within an ecosystem? Why? A food web is a more accurate description of the energy flow within an ecosystem because organisms eat more than one thing and are eaten by more than one predator. Organisms within an ecosystem eat a variety of food. Create an energy pyramid. Place the organisms in the correct level. So we had these guys right here: rabbit, flowers, mice, grass, hawk, trees. So we're going to put these in an energy pyramid. The producer level, trophic level 1, the bottom of the energy pyramid is always a producer. So we're going to look through our lists here and decide which one of these are producers. We have flowers, grass, trees. Flowers, grass, and trees. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so then we are going to look at primary consumers. What are the organisms that are going to feed directly on the producers? So this here is going to be our herbivores, because they are going to feed directly on the producer. So let's look at what do we have for our, let's not choose red. Let's choose orange here. Okay, which ones are herbivores? That is going to be a mouse and a rabbit. A mouse and a rabbit. Okay, so then we have our secondary consumers. That's trophic level 3. So the trophic level, guys, is what the term for the levels in an energy pyramid are called. You need to know that, okay? So the primary consumer is going to be either an omnivore or a carnivore. It's going to feed on the level below it. So it's going to eat the mice or the rabbits, and that is the hawk. Okay. So an energy pyramid shows it's going to go into more how energy, we know that with the food chain and a food web that energy flows through an ecosystem, but it's going to be talking about how much energy flows through an ecosystem here with a energy pyramid. So if 1,000 kilocalories were available at the producer level of the energy pyramid, how many kilocalories would be available at the secondary consumer? Alrighty, because what we've got going on here is that only 10% of the energy at one trophic level transfers on to the next trophic level. It's because that first level needs to use that energy for its own life processes, for its own growth, for its own movement, for its own reproduction. So what's available to move on to the next trophic level would only be 10%. Okay, so let's write that out here. So if we have 1,000 kilocalories available at the producer level, at the trophic level 1, how many kilocalories would be available way up here at the secondary consumers? Okay, so what's coming up here, if only 10% transfers up, then 100 calories of that 1,000 calories is available for the herbivore, for the primary consumer level. Now, those rabbits and mice, they're going to use 90% of that for their own use. And what available then, going up to the next level, would just be 10 kilocalories, because only 10% is available for the next trophic level. So only 10 calories available at the secondary consumer level. Only 10% of the energy at one trophic level transfers on to the next trophic level. What type of energy is stored in the organisms at each trophic level? Chemical energy is stored within the organisms at each trophic level. We know that from our chapter 2, energy, because that's food. We know that anytime we've got food that is stored, that's potential energy, chemical energy. All right. So make sure that you have all of this filled out correctly. Review your outline notes, review your vocab. And you guys got this. Good luck.